check. Oh, hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on Gunditjmara land. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the Port Fairy Folk Festival. I'm sure some of you have already been here. This isn't the first thing you've come to, but it's really good to be back at the Folkie, I've got to say. Today, we are here to hear Courtney Marie Andrews, who is all the way from Phoenix, Arizona, and the idea of flying halfway across the world seemed just so weird in the last 2 years, but Courtney has been traveling all over the place, and she's here for us today. So will you please make welcome Courtney Marie Andrews.
I think my favorite place to play is a bookstore, so I'm happy that happened here. Thanks for having me. I was singing with the choir on the train. I was a traveling man. I did not yet have a name. I was a 1960s movie. I was a one-night love story. I was a you will never see me again. I was moving too fast to see all the paintings in Paris or the sunrise in Barcelona. I was too broke, too shallow to dive deep, too busy carrying the weight of everything. Young with nowhere to be, but you can't get far for free. This ain't no rookie dreaming. This ain't no rookie dreaming. I was on the hunt for visions out of reach. All those daydreaming mornings, all the wishful good night thinking. I have steered through every dark alley in hopes of a light at the end that I could see. Young with nowhere to be, but you can't get far for free. This ain't no rookie dreaming. This ain't no rookie dreaming. I am sitting all alone on this train. I am a passenger to somewhere I do not yet know the name. I am a 1960s movie. I am an unwritten story. I am when will I see you again? Your heart is a prairie open and wide, a fire I never to die. Has anyone ever told you you remind them of James Dean from an old western movie in some galloping scene? You're a magic horse, babe, a premonition dream. You galloped in to save my day and wipe my past clean. Your heart is a prairie open and wide, a fire I never want to die. Wanna be your hero, baby, and your heroine. Give a little if I give a little, I wanna give in. I wanna run away like Bonnie and Clyde. I could wrangle all the bad men or drive us through the night. So let's ride into the sunset and always stay this close. Be each other's sidekicks and build ourselves a home. I can be your cowboy, you can be my cowboy too. If you choose me, well, I will choose you. Some crazy birds here. I think he wants to harmonize. Now you're all just gonna hear that bird. I've pointed it out. Hollywood and Vine, passing through your neighborhood. Had a feeling I should stop by, feed you a line from some old romance book. It's been years since we talked. Does that rock band yours still play? Or have you grown apart like we did? How did we ever go our separate ways? Oh, but it must be someone else's fault. Must be someone else's heart tainted mine. No, I cannot be to blame for the story of this pain. Oh, it must be someone else's fault. Feels like I've gone crazy, like the women in my family usually do. We can't seem to keep our heads on long enough to make it through. But I'm still sensitive and stubborn, still cry more than a person should. But it's this feeling inside that's changed. like I've gone bad, but the world is good. Oh, but it must be someone else's fault, must be someone else's heart tainted mine. No, I cannot be to blame for the story of this pain. Oh, it must be someone else's fault. Must be someone else's fault, must be someone else's words tainted mine. No, I cannot be to blame for the story of this pain. Oh, it must be someone else's fault. Where your dreams are bound, I just can't tell. But we both know, Irene, they won't come true at the bottom of a well. Gain some confidence, Irene. If you speak, let your voice ring out. But keep your grace, Irene. Don't go falling in love with yourself. You are a magnet, Irene. Sometimes good people draw troublesome things. Sometimes good people draw troublesome things. Art is funny, Irene. You can't control who it wants to love. So let it love, Irene, man or woman or anyone it wants. You dream of the north, Irene, well then that's where you ought to be. But you gotta want it, Irene. Don't follow any path half-heartedly. You are a magnet, Irene. Sometimes good people draw troublesome things. Sometimes good people draw troublesome things. troublesome things. Sometimes good people draw troublesome things. So I'm from, as was said before, I'm from Arizona, and every year when I go back to this little town on the Mexican border called Bisbee, and it's just a strange little town in this canyon full of freaks and artists, and it's just one of my favorite places to be, and I've written a lot of records there and have a bunch of painting and poet mentors there, and it's just this really special place, and it's kind of a vortex of just magical beings. And my mentors growing up, there was this couple named Norman and a Whiskey Girl. They were this folk duo that I played with when I was a teenager, and they sort of showed me it was possible to get by playing music with only a couple bucks in your pocket. And kind of inspired me to, go out on my own tours when I was very young. And I lost them a few years ago, within 24 hours of each other. And I always like to dedicate this next song to them because they're kind of one of the reasons that, I'm even out here doing the thing. So this is for Derek and Amy. In a small West Coast town, there's a family and a house where the memories of us belong. We used to live there, free of worry, free of care, free of pain, and what we'd become. If I could go back now, pick you wildflowers, tie 'em in burlap string, tell you what you mean to me. Some days are good, some are bad. Some days I want what we had. Some days I talk myself into a lie. I've grown cautious, I've grown up. I'm a skeptic of love. Don't want to lose what I might find. If I could go back now, I'd pick you wildflowers, tie 'em in burlap string, tell you what you mean to me. Time eases, but can erase the sad look on true love's face. When you know what your heart needs, and you tell them you must be free, but deep down you know the truth. There's no replacing someone like you. If I could go back now, I'd pick you wildflowers, tie 'em in burlap string, tell you what you mean to me. If I could go back now, I'd pick you wildflowers, tie 'em in burlap string, tell you what you mean to me.
Smooth transition, scene change. If you saw this in the program, it was listed as Courtney in conversation with Jock Sarong. I'm not Jock Sarong, I'm his understudy. My name's Matt, and it's very lovely to be here with you. First of all, I'm fascinated by how musicians have handled the last couple of years. So how have the last 2 years been for you as a touring musician who hasn't been able to tour a hell of a lot?
Well, the first 3 months, I was walking in circles, trying to figure out what to do. And then I just kind of had this breakthrough and realization that it might be the only time in my life that I could completely dedicate to creativity. And so I just went full in and did all the things that I couldn't do as a touring musician. I've long wanted to author books, and I've been a poet longer than I've been a songwriter, so I just sort of dived into the things that I couldn't do when I was so busy. Yeah.
I know a few musos who have said that, they probably had longed for this kind of time, but then when it came to it, they couldn't actually write or didn't produce all the things they'd hoped they produced. But it sounds like it was really productive time for you.
Yeah, like I said, the first 3 months I was just kind of in shock because all of our tours were canceled. And then, once I realized that this was kind of time I couldn't get back, I just went full in. Yeah.
And so prior to coming to Australia, you have toured in the US and Europe. What were those first couple of shows like after being off the road for that long?
So emotional. Yeah. I also exhausting. I forgot what we do is just insane. Our lifestyles are just insane. So the first week I was like so tired, like the most tired I've ever been. and then I adjusted, and it just felt so good. It felt like coming back home, you know. I think I had convinced myself that I didn't like touring to cope with the fact that we couldn't tour.
Right.
And then as soon as I got back on the road, I was like, oh, you love this. What are you talking about?
That connection with audiences, to have that again, that must have been something pretty spectacular.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing like human to human. You know, it doesn't matter how many Zoom shows you do or, it's just not the same as that sort of push and pull of energy.
And so this tour has been largely for your album Old Flowers, which came out 2 years ago. But it's taken until now to be able to tour it. So how do you, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but is it fair to consider Old Flowers a breakup album?
That's pretty fair, yeah.
Okay. So how does it feel to sort of be on the road playing those songs for something that is so personal? You've kind of had that sitting with you, unable to tour it and share it with people in that way. How does that sort of feel now? How does that album sort of sit with you now?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like once a song is, cut, you just kind of become the orator. You become the actor, the storyteller, and those feelings take shape, and you kind of exude whatever feeling you're feeling now. You know, it's not like I'm ripping open the wound every time I sing the song. I would go crazy doing that night after night. So I just sort of put whatever I'm feeling now and orate the songs in that way, and those feelings morph over time. And it's making the record was the most painful experience, but once that was done, it was sort of like closing a chapter.
I've always liked the expression, and I've heard it. First time I heard it was in relation to songwriting. It's that the heaviest hammer blows makes the sharpest sword. Do you feel like going through that experience to make that album somehow made it richer or better than it could have been? Or I mean, how does it? How do you feel about making that album and having to go through that to make that album?
I think one of the best things anybody could do, whether you're just an artist at home or an artist in public, is to put your feelings into something creative. So because you're moving the feelings, when they're just like sitting there and stirring, the mosquitoes start to come and bite everybody around it. But if you just kind of move the feelings through something creative, that's the best thing anybody could do.
And you were nominated for a Grammy for the album, which is pretty amazing. Or for us here in Australia, Grammys seem like, kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
I didn't even know I was in the category. Like, I woke up to like 10 texts. Congrats. And I was like, what? It felt insane. I really didn't expect it. You know, I it's what we do is so kind of elusive. So obviously, we do it for the connecting and the creating, that sort of thing, but when you've been doing it for like 15 years, it's nice to that's cool. I get like, a little shout out. So
was there a Grammy Awards to go to, or I don't know?
No, I was hilariously in the Zoom green room with Billie Eilish. Which was hilarious. It was like everybody was in this like Zoom green room, like waiting to be, if you get the award or whatever, you like,
they move you onto the screen kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then there was just her category was like right before mine or something, and it was like me and her and everybody in my category, and we're just like, this is so like dystopian. We're like in this like Zoom Grammy Awards.
It's really hard to make small talk in Zoom, let alone in a green room. So
yeah.
Imagine that was a better idea on
well,
paper.
We couldn't
than in
talk
practice.
to each other.
Right? Is everyone on mute?
Yeah, it's run on mute. It's just all of our faces, and I was like, this is so strange.
Wow, that's not the Grammy experience you're probably expecting.
No, it really wasn't, but it I got to experience that, which may never be experienced.
That's true. That's true. And you were up against some pretty big names as well.
Yeah. There was some amazing people in the category. One of my heroes, Lucinda Williams, was in it, and His School the Messenger was just great, and Sarah Jarosz. Yeah, lots of great folks.
Yeah. And this was in the Americana category, and I have to say, listening to Old Flowers, there's probably a couple of songs on there I think, oh yeah, that's Americana, but then some of the production on it sounds more like it's like an indie album or an alternative sort of album. How do you feel sort of being put in that box of Americana, or what does that sort of mean to you?
It's super funny. I didn't, I never set out to make Americana music. I just was like, oh, I love Neil Young and Bob Dylan and make a songwriter record. And I do really love to work and incorporate modern sounds, and am getting even more explorative with that sort of thing. So, I mean, I think most artists will tell you they don't like to be in a box,
Every artist I've ever interviewed has pretty much said that.
Yeah, exactly. Like every time they put you in a genre box, you're like, no, I don't want to be that, just I want to do, art. But I get that these terms are like ways for people to understand what music might sound like. So I don't take it too personally. I just make it, and if people call it what they call it,
What is Americana music to you?
I think it is a term that was created by the business to make radio less confusing. So to me, it's not a very it's a beautiful term because there's so many amazing artists in that are under the umbrella of Americana. So I don't shy away from it in that way, but I think it's songwriter music often, roots music, things that were sort of like folk music. Like, it's such a wide umbrella, so it's really hard to say, what it is.
Yeah, it feels like there's little bits of country and little bits of folk and little bits of blues and singer-songwriter stuff, and that's all in there, but yet those are genres and categories of the Grammys too, like, of themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it kind of gets murky.
You said you spent a lot of time working on a book, which this is the end result.
Yes.
It's called Old Monarch, collection of poems. But you, as you said before, you were a poet long before you were a songwriter. So is this a distillation of all of that, or tell us about how this specifically sort of came about?
Well, so when I was a kid, I would write poetry and short stories, and I would sing too, but I think my original plan was to be an author, to be going to school for philosophy, and then I discovered that singing and poetry could be combined, and I was like, oh, my two favorite things. That's great. So I have like lots of poems that I've worked over, on for years and years. This particular collection is kind of stuff just written the past 2 or 3 years. But I definitely have lots of work that I've just never released or edited and just have in journals. And yeah.
Do you want to read something to
Yeah.
the good people?
Yeah, definitely. All right. This is a poem called Gratitude for Blue. And I hope to get some like snaps or something, because this is my first live poetry reading. Hallelujah for the Montana sky, lakes, ponds, lazy long rivers, Frank Sinatra's eyes, railroad overalls, at times my disposition. We are so lucky to see a pigment served so sweetly to our senses, luckier than the tribe in Namibia who never had a word for it. Blue is the color of time, hydrangeas, herons, crabs, peacocks, periwinkles, sharks, forget-me-nots. Hearts go blue too. Without it, how would one dream of sailing the ocean to the very edges of the sky or bask in the mystery of somewhere else? Afar off today to discover your own hue and the swinging pendulum of living. Even the darkest shades are capable of being illuminated by the sun. Thank you.
Okay, here's the big question, and I'm going to frame it not as a question. Poetry, lyrics, discuss.
Yes. So it's really esoteric to try and describe it, but how I've chalked it down to, often a song comes from a place that's a heart personal space where I have this thought, this phrase that's kind of almost said in conversation. And poetry often comes from this space where I'm kind of looking down on the conversation. I'm like philosophizing, it's quite heady. And I feel sort of, not that, poems can't get, obviously they have lots of heart in them and they're not detached or anything, but I do feel the sense of I'm looking outside of myself, and songs feel like they're more in the heart space where it's just like, this is how I feel,
There's more heart versus head.
Yeah.
Kind of.
But they both incorporate those things as well. But I kind of go into this Zen place, I'd say, when I write poetry, where I am almost like I'm just outside of it, outside of it all. Like I'm trying to teach myself by becoming the teacher.
That's very Zen.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how it feels to write poetry. Whereas songs, it's like conversational almost. Like I want to like tell somebody something, and I tell them in a song.
Does something start for you as a poem and then you go, no, this has to work as a song, or go the other way?
Honestly, quite rarely. Right. I usually know when it's going to be, that's where it gets esoteric, is I don't know why, but I usually know intuitively if it's going to be a poem or a song. Is there anything that you could go through in here and look at it and go, well, maybe I could put music to this and it would work in a particular way? Or oh, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like, you could do that with, I often get very inspired to write songs via like literature that I read as well. So yeah, I feel like if I set out and had that intention, I could definitely, write some songs from these poems. Yeah. I just haven't.
Yes. Next year. Is there? I think I read somewhere that there's kind of a theme that sort of goes through the book. It's in 3 different sections, but each section has a kind of a theme or an arc or a story to us. Can you sort of explain that? Yeah. So I'm very fascinated by monarch butterflies, and
I kind of really related to their journey at the particular time in my life, and transformation, and how transformation is something that is a good thing, and often we kind of are scared of it and it feels scary. But so I made the book in sections. Like the first section is my childhood, the second section is the becoming, and the third section is the figurative I've become, and I know now I'm the wise old monarch, which hasn't happened yet, but so I'm kind of in the middle section right now in my head, and so yeah, it's just it's almost like a life, I wanted it to have I wanted it to be a journey and how they were, collected and put together.
And old monarch, old flowers. Are you thinking a lot about getting old?
I think no, that's complete coincidence. I think it's just, for me, the word old it means you've transformed and gone somewhere. And we often look at that word as a negative word, like you're getting old. But it's actually one of the most beautiful things you can do is get old, because you've seen things. And I think a lot of people are afraid of seeing too much. But the more you see, the more you become. So, yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the song Old Flowers is a metaphor for a relationship that's faded. Is that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's not about getting old.
No.
I just, yeah.
Just a joke, yeah.
I am interested in the idea that someone who's written poetry for a long time, but then you sort of sat down to write this, specifically write this kind of poetry book, but it's only from the last couple of years that, most people spend the whole life writing their first book from all the things they've written in the past, but it sounds like this is a very specific sort of project. It's not a distillation of everything you've written previously, or is it? Or
no, I think there's only, like I said, it was the 3 years, mostly written in like a span of 3 years. There's only one poem I that's in this book that was written when I was maybe like 20 years old. So it's, yeah, I find that with work, it's, personally I like to distill it into one period so the work feels like threaded,
like a snapshot in a way?
Yeah, exactly. Like the poems have a similar kind of feeling of, because they're in this similar point in my life, So, yeah.
You mentioned before that you were touring from a young age and playing gigs from a young age. And somewhere, I don't know how, I'd love to know how, you ended up in this really massive American rock band that had like Billboard chart-topping albums. And when I was reading about you and listening to your albums and stuff and going, and then all of a sudden, in the middle of this, I discover, and Courtney was in a band called Jimmy Eat World. And I'm like, I have totally heard of those guys. But how did you end up how did that all come about?
Man, so we're both from Phoenix, and I was playing around Phoenix a lot, and it was as random and simple as I was literally on a Greyhound bus sitting next to two prostitutes singing "You Are My Sunshine." And
that old story.
Yeah. And I got a text that was like on my Razor flip phone, which ages me. And it was like, "Would you like to tour with us?" It was from Jim, the lead singer. And I had met him around town because I was like putting out records when I was a teenager and kind of doing these like really rough and tumble like tours where I was just like hitchhiking, Greyhound busing, like doing all that sort of thing. And he just like texted me, and I was like, wow, there's a tour bus, like sure, I'll give it a try. And then yeah, he just, he invited me out, and I had no experience with the music industry. I had no idea, all I knew was busking and small cafes and booking shows on MySpace. So it was just really random. I was a 19-year-old kid when I did that, and it taught me a lot, got me out of Phoenix where there's really not a music industry. So I was like, I learned quite a lot on those tours. That was my college. I joke that was my college.
So what did you learn? What were the key things you learnt really quickly being on the road with like a big rock band?
I learned not to cry every time they made me check my guitar. I learned how to be, a support for a band, to support a band, and how to, I learned about performing in a different way, and they have such a kindness, really. They're some of the nicest people ever, and I'm so glad that of all the bands I would have kind of been a backup singer for, that I went out with them, because they just taught me about the value of being kind to everybody that you work with, and they were kind of like my older brothers, So yeah, I learned a lot.
And what's next?
Oh man. Well, it's not quite announced yet, but I'm doing a couple nexts. There's music in the near future, and yeah, there's more words as well. So just keeping on.
Given it's been 2 years technically since Old Flowers came out, then have you been writing heaps? I know you've been writing poetry, obviously, but have you been writing heaps of songs as well? Like, is the next album ready to get recorded, or where's that at?
The next album is finished.
It's finished?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The next couple albums are finished.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
So you've been super productive.
Yeah. Yeah. There was just so much time, when I realized that, I just really embraced it, I was like, that's what we're here to do. So, make it. Yeah.
Do you literally have 2 albums ready to go?
One of them is ready to go.
Yeah.
One of them is still being worked on.
This is one of the hard parts of the music industry, isn't it? That people, they hear the album that's just come out and they see you go around and you tour it and you play those songs, but you're 2 albums ahead, like in your head.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? How do you sort of keep focused on what you need to focus on?
It's hard sometimes. I think always got to add new songs to sets, because you start to just get kind of excited to play new stuff. And yeah, so I think especially this tour, it's been so strange releasing this record and then not getting to tour it till a year and a half later. Where I've just already made a record since I've toured it, and so there's a lot of like mental shape shifting you got to do, but
you're going to be forever a tour ahead of albums now, you realize.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Yeah, we'll never catch up.
If Old Flowers was a breakup album, what's the next one? Is it a falling in love album, or is it something else? What is it?
Yeah. It sounds like summer. I'll just say that. Yeah. It's definitely kind of a release of some dark times. Just
coming out of the long dark winter of a pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to feel good. So
this feels like part of your the transformation themes as well, of merging into something else.
Yeah, I think I definitely like to explore all aspects of all the feelings, and see how far I can go with them. So it's exciting to attempt to try new things, and yeah.
And what's the album after that going to be? if you're already working on that one?
Yeah, they're both. They could both not be any more different. I'm really into fingerstyle guitar, and one of them is kind of more in that realm. So, yeah.
How are we going for time, Dean? Joe? I have 10 minutes. Cool. do we want to try and take questions from the audience, or is that just
Yeah.
a horrible idea? No? Yeah? Okay. Yes. For those who listen to this later on and who aren't here, the question was that having a young poet speak at Biden's inauguration, has that had an influence on perhaps young people being interested in poetry in America?
That was the most epic reading of a poem. And I think that there has been a kind of slow, for the past 5 years, like upward interest in poetry in general. There's kind of like this rock star of poetry, Rupi Kaur. A lot of people are familiar with her, and she's kind of, in the more Instagram poet world. But there's lots of interest again in it. I think in general, which is so exciting because poetry's kind of been the like, oh, you're gonna release a poetry book? Yeah, like no one will read it. It's been that kind of genre. But I think because of the world we're living right now, so many uncertainties, and poetry feels like this kind of puzzle to like figure out the soul and figure out the world. And I feel like that's probably why, in confusing times and hard times, poetry feels like little teachers, they're like comforting.
Everyone's been so introspective that maybe we're about to enter a new golden age of poetry.
Yeah. Might be the new, beat generation of
Yes, yeah. It does feel like kind of the like the forgotten cousin of the arts sometimes,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, over there.
Oh, I am such a huge Jack Gilbert fan. I don't know if you guys are all familiar. He's kind of he's an American kind of unknown poet. And on the scale of poetry knowndom. He's absolutely incredible. I am such a huge fan. Obviously, the great Mary Oliver is, classic. It's like poetry Bible, basically. W.S. Merwin, Barbara Raz. There's, a bunch of those poets are great.
Tell us a little bit more about, is it Bisbee? Is that what it's called?
Bisbee, yes.
Yeah, because it sounds like, I mean, you said it's full of freaks, but,
in the most endearing way.
Yeah, and so I imagine is it a real kind of art community?
It is, yeah. It used to be the biggest city between St. Louis and San Francisco in the States. So it has it's kind of like this old Western town that just like built in this canyon with beautiful staircases to nowhere and little adobes painted all different colors. And it used to be a mining town, and the mine shut down, became a ghost town. Then hippies found it in the 60s, squatted it, bought houses for $2,000, those crazy stories. And they've just never left, and it's kind of attracted lots of... Actually, I have a great Bisbee story I'll tell you guys. There was this guy who wrote a book in Bisbee, and it was a book about his life, and he went to the gift shop in Bisbee, and he's like, will you sell my book? And this is such a Bisbee story. And the gift shop's like, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to sell your book. And out of revenge, he bought the store right next to the gift shop and opened up the one book bookstore. Sold nothing but his own book for years. And he would just sit out front in this like little chair, and people would walk past, and he'd just promote his book. And that's just to a T one of the crazy things that happens in Bisbee. Cave people that just live in there and hang art in their little caves, and it's just a really kind of quirky town. It's been untouched by corporations, and it's just kept its, I think because it's so far from everything, it's just kept its weirdness, So, anyway.
Because I was going to, made me think of that. There must be a lot of poets in a place like Bisbee.
There is. There's actually a woman that goes around town and laminates her poems and puts them everywhere. There's probably like 500 of them, and they're just laminated and posted everywhere. And yeah, it's a town full of artists for the sake of art, and I think that's why it's so intriguing. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions from the floor? Yes.
Hi. Yes.
Yeah, how does a poet mentor work?
Yeah. So I have both painting and poet mentors there. There's everybody in Bisbee that makes art, which is probably like 80% of the town, are artists in some capacity. My poet mentor and my painting mentors, Judy Perry and Kate Wilkinson, both absolutely incredible artists. I think I've only really adapted them as mentors in the past 5 years, but I've realized that they're so important because they're truly not, even though they're selling their work, they're truly not in the business to sell. And I think that what I've learned the most from them is that they're just so dedicated to their practice, and they're older than me. They're both in their 70s and 80s, so they've been through a lot as artists. They've seen a lot as both poet and artist, and I think, kind of seeing that trajectory and how they've just completely dedicated their lives to their craft, and in my opinion, maybe don't even get the praise that they deserve for how incredible they are. That the praise really just doesn't matter. It's about the work. And I think more than anything, that's what I've learned, is that the work speaks. That's all. Nothing else matters,
'Cause poetry seems a really hard thing to teach. So is that being a mentor is about more than, it's just about support in some ways, or?
Yeah, it's less about, Kate's looked at some poems of mine in Old Monarch, actually, and she just sort of, was just gave me some, like, insight and tips and that sort of thing, which is very helpful. But more than that, more than like us sitting down and her teaching me poetry or whatever, it's more of a lifestyle mentor, like more of hearing about her life and hearing about how she creates in her process, and just sitting down over tea with her, really.
I was going to say, this sounds
Yeah.
like sitting around a kitchen table
Yeah.
with a cup of tea kind of thing.
Yeah, and then I just leave every time feeling good. I leave feeling excited to go back home and do it, do the thing. And yeah, I think mentors are something that have really been lost quite recently, and I think it's super important to, if you can, like, really find somebody to that's older than you, that truly feels like a mentor, that inspires you.
Before we let you go, is this your first time at the Port Fairy Folk Festival, or have you been here?
It is, yeah.
And we'd love to know what you think of it.
I mean, so magical.
You get to play in a bookshop, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I've actually, prior to coming here, somebody told me that this is the best, most amazing bookshop ever.
They were right.
And so I agree. It's really beautiful. So.
Well, thank you for coming to Blarney Books. Thank you for coming to the Port Fairy Folk Festival. Thank you for coming to Australia. And I hope the rest of your tour and the rest of your folkie is fantastic.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks
Ladies
for having
and gentlemen, Courtney Marie Andrews.